An average Canadian homeowner will make over 80 mortgage-related decisions throughout their lifetime, and all these decisions can affect how they live their daily lives, from making sure they choose the right lender to deciding on the right term, type, and rate. Mortgage-related decisions can have a tremendous impact, so making the right decisions can really count. That's why when mortgage customers are faced with having to make important mortgage decisions, they turn to mortgage brokers. Mortgage brokers offer expertise and advice, so mortgage customers can be more informed. But mortgage brokers also do a lot more. They offer their customers a one-stop shop for great rates and value-added mortgage features from their partners like First National. Mortgage brokers are also licensed and regulated professionals who have the credibility to help customers find the right mortgage, even when new mortgage rules are introduced. Mortgage brokers offer personalized service, so customers don't have to get bogged down in paperwork or feel uneasy about the status of their application. They work with partners like First National, who are also dedicated to keeping the customer experience positive and seamless. This year and in the years to come, many Canadians will be faced with having to make mortgage decisions that will affect their daily lives. They can count on mortgage brokers and their partners to help.
Hey friends, welcome and good morning in the West, good afternoon in the East. It's Gary Mauris from the DLC Group of Companies. I am super excited to be hosting this series of the Level Up podcast. My guest today is a dear friend of mine, someone who I respect and admire very, very much. I'm going to start with Mr. Dave Liniger's bio here before we jump right into it. Dave Liniger is the co-founder of RE/MAX, the Denver-based global real estate franchise that he co-founded with his wife, Gail, in 1973. RE/MAX is the leading franchisor of real estate offices throughout the world and has expanded to over 9,000 offices in over 110 countries with 144,000 sales agents. Mr. Liniger is well respected internationally for his vast knowledge of the real estate and franchising industries. Mr. Liniger retired from the CEO position in 2018 and continues to lead the network as chairman of the board. In October 2013, RE/MAX did its initial public offering, listed on the New York Stock Exchange as RE/MAX. The Liniger family continues to be by far the largest shareholder in the organization. Dave was born and raised in a small town of Marion, Indiana. He served in the United States Air Force for 5 years, serving in Vietnam, Thailand, Texas, and Arizona. His final military assignment was at the ROTC detachment at the Arizona State University in Tempe. During his military service, Dave became interested in real estate after successfully buying and selling properties to supplement his income. After leaving the United States Air Force, he worked in residential real estate for a year and then moved to Denver area to start his real estate career in Colorado. 50 years ago, Dave revolutionized the real estate industry when he created the RE/MAX business model, which combines a maximum commission concept with world-class support service for realtors. The name RE/MAX was coined from the words real estate and maximums. The model continues to attract experienced top-producing agents who lead the industry in individual sales and professionalism and education. The RE/MAX balloon is one of the most recognizable corporate images and brands in the world, and it has become a symbol of the leading real estate network. Mr. Liniger has spoken to over 3 million people in 30 countries. He has been featured in Entrepreneur, Forbes, Fortune, Inc., Success, and other leading publications and media outlets across the globe. In 2010, he was included in the Bloomberg Businessweek's profile of the 50 most powerful people in real estate. Dave is a serial entrepreneur, having owned many businesses, travel agencies, home building companies, oil drilling, exploration, NASCAR racetrack owner, NASCAR race team, motorcycle shops, and is the leading breeder of Arabian horses in the world. His community involvement: Dave has set a tone of philanthropy since the early days of RE/MAX. The culture of giving back attracts professionals, agents, and professionals who care about making a difference in their community. Since 1992, RE/MAX has been the official real estate sponsor of the Children's Miracle Network Hospitals. In 2011, Dave and Gail accepted the Children's Miracle Network Hospitals Founder Award on behalf of the RE/MAX Network, which has now raised more than $156 million for local children's hospitals. He and his wife, Gail, also own the acclaimed Sanctuary Golf Course in Sedalia, Colorado, devoted primarily to charity golf tournaments. His private golf course has raised more than $100 million for organizations since opening in 1997. Dave has spent his life participating in adventure sports. He has logged over 3,000 scuba dives, has hunted big game safaris on more than 100 trips, camped and photographed around the world. He is a multi-engine commercial jet-rated pilot, an avid golfer, and has personally raced in several NASCAR divisions for more than 10 years. If that's not enough, in 1998, he attempted to fly a helium balloon around the world in the stratosphere at heights of 120,000 feet. Dave spent much of 2012 recovering from a life-threatening infection in his spine, probably resulting from the Agent Orange in his Vietnam days. After months in a coma and multiple surgeries, Dave spent 6 months paralyzed in a spinal cord rehabilitation center and eventually regained his ability to function. He wrote a New York Times bestseller describing the experience, My Next Step. With that, if you'd please give us a thumbs up and give a heartfelt welcome to a dear friend of mine, Mr. Dave Liniger. Dave, good afternoon. How are you today?
I'm awesome. How are you?
Dave, I'm great. It is so incredibly special to have you here. As I said in my opening, you've had an extraordinary impact in my life. You've been someone who I've considered a mentor for many, many years. And I can't wait to highlight and feature some of your story, history, and background to our group today. To the group on the call, really quickly, I am going to be giving away, when the book comes out next year, 50 copies of Dave's newest upcoming book, The Perfect 10. So anyone who makes a comment, sends in a question, participates, is going to be in a draw, and Tara's going to send them out as she always does. David, let's start off with maybe the very beginning. Maybe you could share a little bit about your upbringing in Marion, Indiana, and how you found yourself in the real estate industry.
Well, I grew up in a small farming community in Indiana, kind of rural nature. I grew up on a 40-acre farm. My parents were business people in town, and we sharecropped out the farm. I learned very early a good work ethic. I picked up Midwestern values, typical childhood. I was probably might have been ADD at the time. They didn't talk about that back in the 1950s. I I was very smart, but I didn't get very good grades. I just wasn't interested in whatever was going on. Interesting enough, I tried to go to college for a couple of semesters. I went because my parents said that's what I had to do. I had no goal, I had no vocation I was interested in it, and didn't do very well. From that, I realized I needed to grow up. And I was always small for my size. I was also very immature. And I joined the Air Force, which was a marvelous opportunity. It gave me 5 or 6 years to mature and become, a human being instead of a kid. The discipline, the training, and the other thing is I got to watch real heroes. So many of our kids today, they look at rock stars and they look at movie stars and they look at TikTok and all this nonsense. My life was totally surrounded by real American heroes, fighter pilots, combat soldiers, and you kind of become who you surround yourself with. And so when you surround yourself with great people, you all of a sudden have great aspirations. And so in the military, my career really thrived. I just loved it.
Yeah, absolutely incredible. And it's early because it's funny because in those early days, I know you speak of the family values and the value they had around hard work. So you grew up, you went to the military. I know you did 4 tours of duty, but you were always more interested in sort of finding ways to earn money than the academia, sort of path that you spoke of. So, I know the story. There was a book that you read that resonated with you, and it sort of got you thinking about your transition to real estate. And I think you began by, purchasing an initial single property, and that tweaked your love for the real estate business. Maybe expand on that for us.
Well, there was a book written by a fellow by the name of William Nickerson, and he lived in Southern California, and he found a duplex that was in poor condition. He negotiated, got a good price, and he rehabbed it himself. And then, sure enough, he was able to raise the rent significantly, and then he bought another one and another one. And eventually he wrote a book called How I Turned $1,000 into $1 million in my part-time. And he went on to become a motivational speaker, became incredibly wealthy, and ended up owning thousands of apartment units and such. So I was intrigued with it. And when I started in the military, I was the very bottom rung of a soldier, no stripes, nothing. So my starting pay in 1964, 65, whatever it was $90 a month. And I lived off base. I had gotten married young. And so I worked 3 part-time jobs to make enough money to really have a decent living. And I made about $500 a month with the part-time jobs. And I actually found a house with about $10,000. I bought it, fixed it up, sold it in 6 months for $16,000. And so I made almost a $6,000 profit, which was more than I made on all 3 of my part-time jobs and my full-time job in the military. And so the die was cast, and I decided that I wanted to stay in the military for a while, but I would start buying and selling and flipping houses.
And then you eventually, I think, got your real estate license because you just sort of thought it was a clever way to save on commissions because you fell in love with sort of buying and selling. At what point did you transition into, hey, I'm doing a really, really good job as an agent? And where was that leap to, I want to revolutionize the franchise space, the real estate space? And at that point, I think where you started was Denver, Colorado, obviously.
Well, I was actually still at Arizona State University in Phoenix, and I decided to get the license to save part of the commission, which would help me on my down payments. I got the license, no intention of ever selling. I was skinny, I was young, I had a buzz cut, military haircut, And I did save a lot of commissions, but I looked around and this office was filled with a lot of old and tired losers. The standards in the real estate industry in the United States in the 50s and 60s were incredibly low. And I kept looking at these old people. I mean, hell, some of them are 40, 50 years old. And I was thinking, well, if they can do it, I can do it. I tried part-time, 6 months, didn't make it work. I quit. And the next morning I went to a seminar I'd prepaid for by Dave Stone, very famous realtor, builder, consultant, and shook his hand, listened to him. He was so cool. I'd never had professional training. I'd never had a mentor. And as it would happen, I shook his hand. I told him, God, this is wonderful. You're so smart. If I could say that, I could get a SAR listing. And he said, well, how long you been trying? And I said, 6 months. He says, if I were you, I'd quit. And I said, I did, but I'm not going to now. And that night, I lucked into a small deal, a Latino family, listed it, fixed up. It sold that night. The next morning, I had 4 referrals from them, and I made 4 sales in the next 2 days. So what the hell was the difference of me 48 hours later, and all of a sudden, 6 months, nothing, and 48 hours later, 5 deals? It was simply, I had confidence. Beforehand, I knew I was skinny and I looked like I was 15 years old and nobody would believe me. But all of a sudden, I made these deals and the confidence came. And after that, the sky was the limit.
Isn't that absolutely extraordinary? And I want to point something out to all of our viewers here. And this is fundamentally one of the most amazing things that I admire about Mr. Liniger here is his lifelong desire for constant personal development and learning. I met him through a group that him and I are part of, have become good friends. We had a very, very tight mastermind group. And David's still here, today is the front of the class. He doesn't, miss anything for bio breaks. He takes the breaks on the break. He sits there from the very, very beginning to the very end. But this personal development started for you when you were like very, very young. I also know that you resonated with, and it was a book that I've read and recommended before, but Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich, David. And I think that actually, was really pivotal for you in terms of understanding how a positive attitude, the right mindset can really impact sort of your direction in life.
Yes, there's no doubt about that. When I decided to leave the desert, I didn't enjoy Scottsdale. It was so hot in the summer. And at that time, even if you're showing houses, air conditioning in the cars didn't work that well that you couldn't just leave the air conditioning on. The car would overheat. And so if you show a property, you turned off the engine, went into the air conditioning, came back out, and you're back in 110 degrees. So I decided God's country was Colorado. And we decided when I finally got out of the service, we would move to Denver. We moved to Denver with my sales record. I could interview with anybody, and I looked at the top 10 companies, joined the best one, and then about six months later, I decided I'll get my broker's license. I'm going to start my own company. The thing that's interesting was when I started my own company, I had no professional management experience other than leadership in the service. I was outstanding at sales, and I was outstanding at, shall we say, customer service. And I had some leadership ability, but I really had no management or marketing ability. And so I teamed up. I said, I need an assistant vice president that would be, or a vice president in charge of administration. I interviewed 28 people, no to 27. On the 28th was Gail Maine. She had just married, trailing spouse, moved to Denver from St. Louis. And I convinced her I was going to build the biggest real estate network in the world. So I was a pretty good salesman. So she took about a 50% pay cut. And I told her if she would help me build it, hire the secretaries, find the office space, design them, buy the furniture, set up the bookkeepers, secretaries, get the contracts, and so on. I'd do the recruiting and I'd do the training. The partnership was made in heaven. And so when we first got started, the whole industry hated it. Our commission structure was very unique and unusual, and we really floundered. The industry tried to put me out of business, and realistically, they didn't have to try very hard. I was doing a pretty good job by myself. But, we hung on, and a little secret to success for your viewers: if you're failing, if it's not working, and you're strong enough to say, I don't want to fail. I went to my managers. I had 8 offices. They were all 20 years older than me. And I said, look, I know this is all screwed up. The system works, but nobody would join just yet because nobody wants to be a pioneer. What am I doing right? What am I doing wrong? If you were me, how would you change my leadership? How would you teach me to be the leader you want me to be? Now, that takes a pretty thick skin because realtors are pretty darn vocal. And
right.
But they were all appreciative that I would ask for the help. Then the question is, will you implement the help that they offer you? And that's the problem with being a mentor to a lot of people. You can mentor them, they nod their head, they say yes, and they walk out and they keep doing what they were doing before instead of executing new ideas. And so it was an era when I'm so frustrated that, man, I'm a great real estate salesman, but I'm doing a lousy job running a company. And so all of a sudden, this personal development came about. It came about because of necessity. And so Gail and I started taking every course that the realtors gave on how to own and operate and run a business. We went to the American Management Association and took all the management courses that we could take. And when we went to those courses, we didn't sit in the back and then go have cocktails at the end of the evening. We took copious notes. We paid for the course ourselves and we were broke. And we came back and said, here's 10 good ideas. How do we implement this? And that started a lifelong understanding that lifelong learning is the way to real success, wealth, and happiness in life.
David, I want to just hold you up there right now because I want to just drive home a couple of these points because they're so unbelievably powerful. So again, you realize, I mean, and just so those of you who don't know, for the first 3 years, they were broke. They were struggling to survive. They certainly, were hardly making, payroll. But yet they just kept, that dogged determination. And again, they went back to personal development. They went back to, as he said, to every single event, every speaker, every association, every training, and just immerse themselves. The other thing Dave said that was really important, and I know he's done this for more than 40 years now, but for more than 40 years, Dave Liniger was the #1 trainer at RE/MAX, right? All over the world now, but still considered the #1 trainer. So he recognized his vital roles and what he was best at. He was good at making phone calls, popping into offices, recruiting, realtors to join his vision and to join him and Gail and where they were going. But he also took that dogged determination and that sales ability and taught that to others. And he did that for 40 years, right? While he was active in there. David, how important is that, do you think, for you? And I'm speaking on behalf of maybe a franchise owner right now who's listening to this, who says, I got a good organization, but I could do so much more. And they struggle with personal development. They struggle with training. How important is that for you to be the leader in your office and to be that person who's hosting the training and who's doing that, those vital roles in recruiting? You
and I both have heard Darren Hardy say a lot of times, he'll ask us the question, what's the most important trait of leadership? And of course, the answer is very simple, and it's a true leader sells hope. He gives the example, obviously, of politics. Martin Luther King, he was selling hope that everybody, blacks and whites, could live better together. If you looked at Obama, his concept, his button said hope. If you looked at Hillary, she said stronger with Hillary. That had nothing to do with anything. If you looked at Trump, and he said make America better again, and he stole that from Ronald Reagan.
Right, make America great again.
America great. And so true leaders understand what their followers are looking for, They sell hope that, yes, you can accomplish this too. In my case, after we became successful, I was the perfect example to sell regions and franchises to, because I was able to say, when I was in my 20s, I started Remax in Denver, and within 5 years, we were the number one company in the entire state. And if a 20-year-old person without a college degree can achieve that kind of success, and the system is now proved, think about what you could do with it. And by the same token, when we look at the leaders in our company, the top producers, the best brokers, the best franchisees, we put them all on the stage at all of our conventions, talking about their struggles when they got started, that they overcame the struggles. And realistically, what they're doing is moving the room forward with hope that this concept works and we can have a better life together.
Yeah, absolutely. Such a great share. It's interesting because there's transitions and there's seasons in business, and so many stories. And even today, relating to our business, of our large offices and our franchise owners started off, and it took them that year or two or three, and something all of a sudden ignited or resonated with them, and they completely fundamentally changed the way they did business, and they really realized that. I think what Darren classifies it as dealers of hope, right? Showing people that although the market is tough right now, we're going to get through it. This too will pass, right? Spring is going to come again, and summer is going to come again, and fall is going to come again. Really, really interesting perspective, David. Thank you for that. So Dave, what you accomplished in 15 years is absolutely outstanding. But we know starting a business kind of from scratch is incredibly hard. I just say it's, you got to be prepared to get kicked in the teeth over and over and over and get back up. What sort of are just maybe one or two setbacks that you had to navigate through over the years? I mean, I know at times, you got sued from competitors and you were challenges with regulators, and it was just nonstop. Any setbacks that sort of, you remember vividly, and maybe share with us how you and Gail pushed through them?
Okay. We'd started making some pretty good money. We were expanding. As a matter of fact, 1976, I sold one franchise in Calgary. 77, we started selling franchises full-time, regions. Sold about 30 regions and over 100 franchises. So we were profitable. 1980 came along, recession was there. The savings and loan crisis in the United States was awful. 60% of our mortgage lenders filed bankruptcy. We ended up with millions of foreclosure properties. And Reagan, trying to stop inflation, changed the interest rates in a year from 7.5% to 16.5%. And so all of a sudden, we got this network of wonderful franchise or real estate salesmen who are looking at the fact of, oh my God, look at the interest rates. We adapted. We told the customers, if you can afford to qualify or if you can afford to put some money down, the interest rates will go back down. Just buy today, house prices are going to go back up, and buy today at today's prices and refinance in 2 or 3 years when we get through it. That worked. The other significant problem was 2008, and that's when the financial crisis hit the world. The National Association of Realtors in 2 years went from 1,500,000 to less than 800,000. The foreclosures were unreal, and you just have to figure out, how do you push through this? How do you find the ability to adapt and change?
It's interesting. We're going to go back to that adapting and changing a little bit further in the interview. I want to just, David, I want to play that clip that I sent you. It just speaks to what David was just talking about. That video from 1981 on a Canadian news station talking about interest rates, because, Dave Liniger has been through 9 U.S. presidents, 8 recessions, and they've survived and thrived no matter what the market is, right? Just by being adaptable and changing the way they do business. Maybe play that video really quick for us, Dave.
Down today, but once again, the drop was marginal. The new rate is 17.08%. That's only 6/100ths of a percentage point lower than last week. Chartered banks are unlikely, as a result, to lower their prime rates. There'll be no relief from 15 and 16% mortgages either, although, as Fred Langan reports, those high rates don't seem to be frightening home buyers.
The move from the suburbs to the city. Carrie Hallivan and her husband have just sold their house about 1 hour from downtown Toronto and have bought another one closer to the center of the city. It means lower commuting costs and less time getting to work. But it also means higher mortgage payments, something Hallivan knows about as a loan officer for a bank.
I think if you have to buy a house, if in the area of looking for a house, and that's what the mortgage rates are, what are you going to do? You have to accept it. You have to accept it. And of course it bothers you. The payments are high, but you can't do anything else. Those are the rates.
High mortgage rates mean bigger monthly payments. On a $50,000 mortgage at 10%, the payment would be $447 a month. But at 15%, and that's a good rate today, the payment is $623 a month. But people buying houses seem to be willing to pay.
David, let's hold it there.
To buy a house and they don't pay any attention to the rate, or they.
Awesome. Thank you. So that was 1981 in Canada. And obviously, Dave was, at that point, Canada and at least the USA. David, I've heard you speak about the Charles Darwin famous quote. A lot of people misunderstand that quote about the strongest to survive. You want to just talk to us about adaptability?
Yeah, Charles Darwin is rumored to have said the strongest of the species survives. He never said that. What he said was the most adaptable of the species survives. And so the dinosaurs were the strongest and they disappeared. The mosquitoes are still here 500 million years later. And so often people would ask me over the last 50 years, how did RE/MAX survive 50 years, 8 recessions, 9 presidencies, and do so well? And I used to say, what was the quality of the people? We had great brokers, great managers, great regional directors, and fabulous salespeople. That's only part of the answer. It's finally, the last couple of years, I figured out that the smartest and the strongest sometimes are in the same person, but it's the most adaptable you are. And so when the interest rates went from 7.5 to 15.5, it was only the really smart agents that kept their nose to the grindstone and kept working. In the 2008 crisis, I had a wonderful RE/MAX agent in Paradise Valley, very wealthy part of the Scottsdale area in Arizona. She only sold $1 million houses, and she was always on the leaderboard. She called me one day and she said, Dave, I'm going broke. There hasn't been $1 million property sell in Paradise Valley in the last 12 months. And I said, what are you doing? And she says, I'm going to switch and start selling $100,000 to $200,000 foreclosures, short sales, bank repossessions. And it's not what I want to do, but I want to survive until the market turns around. And she had taken a course on getting a certified designation for being an expert at foreclosures and short sales, recommended it to me. I hired the guy to come in, speak to my officers. He had about 600 people with the designation. And I told him, you prove to me your course is good, I'll get you 20,000 people in 10 months. And he put on his program. We made DVDs and movies, redid his manuals, mass produced the thing, scaled it up. And then I was doing a speaking tour in 30 major cities in the United States anyway. So at the speaking tour, I put up a video for 10 minutes about, hey, this course will help you get through the world. And sure enough, we signed up over 14,000 RE/MAX agents, and our brokers invited over 6,000 of our competitors to come and take the course too. And so now all of a sudden 20,000 people had the designation. And so that's the concept of adaptability. You know, if you can't do what you usually did, you got to change. The same old story. You can't do today's business with yesterday's methods and expect to be in business tomorrow.
Yeah, I've heard you say, you've said it to me personally, Gary, no competitive advantage lasts forever. Right. That's coming right out of your lips to mine. And I remember, hearing that from you and thinking it doesn't matter what you do, how well you think you do it, what kind of advantage it gives you in the market. If you're not adapting and changing and growing and looking at new ways, you are going to be, dead.
That's absolute.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Dave, I want to just, we're going to jump around here a little bit, but I want to just hit one more thing about Canada. I love the fact that Canada played such a huge part in the growth of RE/MAX. In the early days, you obviously have had a tremendous eye for talent. You've recognized something special in a lot of people, but you recognize something special in Walter Schneider and Frank Polzler in the early years of RE/MAX, who originally, I think you sold them the territory in Ontario and Atlantic, and they've gone on and taken this brand, all over the world. Maybe just kind of like share your thoughts on those two individuals and what made them successful and basically what it did for RE/MAX.
Yeah, it's a very interesting story. Frank had called and talked to me, and he said that I have a company, about 600 agents. I'm losing money. I'm watching your success. I want to fly to Denver and talk to you. And I said, Frank, I travel all the time, and I might not be there, but if I'm there, I'll try to spend a few minutes with you. But my staff is awesome. They came down. I did not have time to meet him. He left me a nasty ram on my desk, said I came here to negotiate general to general. So I knew I'd hurt his feelings, didn't mean to. He was a fine gentleman, and he'd already left back for Canada. So I caught the last flight to Canada that night to Toronto. I stayed at it was called the Harbor Castle something at the time. I don't know what it is now.
Still Harbor Castle, still there.
Yep. And I went to his sales meeting the next day at 8:30. I walked in and I said, Frank, my name's Dave Liniger. I came to shake your hand. And so it started off a little bit tough, but he was having a lot of financial problems. You guys were having a terrible market too. And so he believed in it. And he says, you've got to give us a chance. We can do this. And I said, you ought to take your down payment and spend it on yourself. I don't see how you're going to survive. And with the quality of the agents in most companies, you're going to lose 60, 70% of your agents that just can't afford to pay us every month to work for us. And he says, I'm watching your success. It's the future of the business, and we want in. I called my office that night, my 4 partners, and I said, getting on the plane back to Denver, and I said, damn, I just think I made the biggest mistake in my life. And says, this old fool's probably in his 50s or 60s. He's tired and worn out. He's got a couple young bucks with him that are in the early 20s, and they're broke. And I just couldn't say no to him. And that one decision saved the RE/MAX organization. They became our 2 most prolific franchise salespeople. They led the way for everything. They saved America, our American offices, as they became more and more successful. We opened Quebec, we opened Western Canada, we opened the Atlantic states, and then we started expanding throughout the world. And the Canadians are much more sophisticated than Americans are. It's because of your roots coming from Europe, to where Americans all came to America and stayed in America. And so Frank had been born in Austria, had left there just at the end of World War II. And they said, hey, let us open Europe for you. And I gave them a sweetheart deal. They had done a fabulous job for us. They opened Europe. Obviously, it took them 10 years to get about 5,000 agents. And in the next 5 years, they probably got another 10,000 agents. And the rest is history. So those 2 individuals are probably as important or more important than Gail and I were in creating the success of the RE/MAX organization.
What a beautiful testament. So classy, such a iconic story. I've gotten to know Walter a little bit, had numerous conversations over the years with them. I think he's a wonderful individual. Every time just speaks incredibly highly of you guys. It's exactly what every company is hoping to build with their network, and have guys that rise to the occasion and do exactly what they did for Remax. Incredible. I have a question, Dave, that just came in from one of my top franchise owners and a really good friend of mine, a guy by the name of Derek Battaglia. And he says, can I ask Mr. Liniger what he thinks of the flat fee real estate model of paying a monthly fee and a transaction fee, no commission split to the broker, and does he see a future in that business model of mortgage agents and or real estate brokers that maybe are dual licensed? Kind of a two-part question.
There are lots of concepts out there, and depending on the leadership, most concepts can be made to work to a certain degree. When we were first starting Remax as a pure 100% concept, we charged a share of the rent, the secretary, the whatever, personal expenses of advertising, signs, and so on, and a fixed management fee. The thing that happened was, as we started becoming successful, our agents doubled and tripled their income, and our brokers on the flat fee were still stuck with the flat fee, and they had a terrible time moving it at all. The agents were getting rich, the brokers are going broke. Well, if you cut the head off, the body dies. And we started experimenting with a 95-5 concept, and that made the profitability to the broker very, very good. And so as the system succeeded, the broker's expenses went up. That 5% helped offset that. And so lots of different systems will work. I personally believe that having the broker vested in some part of the commission is important. Whether you do that as a transaction fee, I can't discuss that. I don't care. We are still the most successful real estate franchisor in the world. So that just goes proof positive. If you look at it, many of your major trust companies have merged, and some failed, and yet there's still business out there for everybody. So it's up to you to figure out in your own head what system appeals to me, what can I sell, and what's fair to everybody.
Yeah. Thanks, Dave. Very articulated well. So David, Remax has now become one of the most impressive sort of recognizable brands in the world. Can you tell us about the early thoughts on the ad fund and maybe the story of the Remax balloon?
The Remax balloon, let me say this. Every really great idea that has come to Remax has come from the field. The ivory tower has a tendency to think they're the smartest people in the world, and they're not. It's the foot soldiers on the front line of the battle. They're doing the day-to-day work of being a real estate agent. And so one of our regions was in Albuquerque. The Albuquerque Balloon Festival had just started 2 or 3 years ago, and they had about 40 balloons at the balloon festival. Our regional directors came to us and said, hey, look, here's a balloon logo, red, white, and blue, Remax. It should be our logo, and we should have balloons every place. The regional directors said, no, we're not interested. Our sign is a red, white, and blue sign. Following year, they came back, and there were more balloons. They had got a balloon for charity fundraisers, grand openings, take to, parks and so on. And we started realizing, look how good that is. So the end result for us is that we bought balloons, started a campaign, and it worked. It became one of the most recognizable logos out there. My initial thought, what's it got to do with real estate? Well, what's the word Remax got to do with real estate? So in reality, you take your ideas from the field, and there's going to be 90 out of 100 that are crazy, but there's going to be 1 or 2 out of that 10 that's left that are business-changing ideas. And so it's absolutely a must that leaders must listen to the people they work with, because Why have only one person's brain power when you can have the brain power of 140,000?
Yeah, absolutely love that. It's funny. Yeah, you'll see on my wall here, I have a sign that I started, 17 years ago when we started the company, and it was yes, right? Why yes? And it just always reminds me of the opportunity to listen to every single idea. And the best idea comes from, anyone. And most of our ideas, like you just said, have come from the field too. It doesn't matter whether it's Deb working at the front answering the phone or whether it's someone in the finance team, to always be open. I want to talk a little bit about maybe sort of franchise owners, top leaders, teams, and sort of some of the attributes that you see in a top owner that you see in in a Michael and a Walter compared to maybe somebody else. What is the difference that you see in someone like those two compared to maybe another franchise owner who isn't quite as successful? Is there key attributes that really resonate?
There's many. It's often said that courage comes from confidence, and confidence comes from experience. And so it's pretty hard to be courageous the first time you go skydiving, but by the time you've done 20 or 30, you're probably fairly confident. By the time you've done a couple hundred, there's nothing to it. Selling a franchise is a difficult task. And unlike houses where realtors are used to, I'm sorry, got interrupted.
No problem.
Making sure I have enough battery for my laptop here. So when you talk about selling franchises, you get rejected a lot, maybe 9 out of 10 times. When you're selling houses and you're a good salesperson, you probably succeed about 70, 80% of the times. So some people just can't handle the rejection of being told no. So to us, Frank and Walter figured it out. They understood franchising is a numbers game. And one franchise in Toronto, you're a nobody. Several hundred franchises in Toronto, you got huge advertising budgets. You got tens of thousands of for sale signs. They drive business to all the RE/MAX offices. And so Frank and Walter figured it out right away. Their job was to sell franchises. The franchise's job was to recruit agents. And so the personal courage that it takes for the leader to say, I want to sell you this franchise, have the door slammed in your face 9 out of 10 times, and still have the courage and the smile on your face to call on 10 more.
Mm-hmm. And that actually goes for any of you recruiting agents into your offices, right? Attracting top agents and top talent, whether it's a franchise or an individual top performer. It's interesting, David, because I remember, speaking and seeing and reading this in the past, but statistically through RE/MAX history, the more RE/MAX agents that were on the street, the more agents that were in the network, the more income the average agent earned per year.
Yeah, we did a study about 10 years after we started, and we were getting complaints from the brokers. There were too many offices, and complaints from the agents. There were too many agents. And so we did a financial analysis. We looked at our 3 worst performing regions, which at the time was, I think, Phoenix, Las Vegas, and someplace in California. And our 3 best regions, which was Colorado, the Chicago area, and I believe it was Atlanta. And we track every month the statistics of every office, every agent throughout North America. And we were able to show that the more agents that you had, the more offices you had, the number of transactions per agents went up, the number of income went up, and the number of agents per office went up. In other words, we were going to call it a campaign called Overwhelming Market Domination, and trying to convince the agents we're better to compete with each other than against the whole business or against the rest of them. And so the attorney said, "Oh my God, you can't use OMG. That sounds like a trust or a monopoly." And then we decided, well, let's call it premium market share. And some of the women looked up and said, "Boss, nobody wants PMS." And then somebody else said, well, let's call it premier market presence, that we are number one in the number of premier agents in the market. We're number one in advertising in the market. We're number one in market share in the office. We're number one in years of experience per agent in the office. And so PMP became our battle cry of expand, 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 and get your competitors to join you. Try to get to 30, 40% market share, because market share brings people in the door for free.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you for that. That's absolutely amazing. Makes so much sense, right? As you said, the more agents, the more sign, the more consumer confidence, the more awareness, right? The average income. Thank you. Dave, I want to sort of, I want to get to the other side of you. And it's interesting because I know one of the questions we're going to get is, how did you manage it? And I know, you can articulate on this a little bit, but you were really clear on how you spent your time. I've once heard you say that, you can fill 18, 20 hours a day, and if you want to fill it in, but if you say you want to work 8 or 10 hours a day and be really, really focused and dialed in on how you're spending your time, you can have an extraordinary life where you can have the adventure side as well as the business side. So you've done some crazy things. I mean, you owned the NASCAR team for, I think almost a dozen years. You raced it. You went on 100 big games, 4 hunts. You've done more than 3,000 scuba dives. How did you find that balance between, the demanding work, the schedule, the family, the 4 kids, and yet being able to, find that adventure in your life that I think was so important?
I started focusing on time management. I listened to every expert out there say, you have to have balance in your life, which, by the way, that's a lofty goal. There is no such thing as balance in your life if you're in the real estate or mortgage business. There'll be times when you're out of balance, and that's what you have to take care of. But I became an expert at time management, and time management is basically how do you run your life? Well, one secret to time management is work always expands to meet the number of hours you'll give it. And so if you're in love with your new company and you're willing to work 18 hours a day, there'll be 18 hours a day of work that you'll never get done with. Meetings. If you say we're going to have an important meeting and you don't put a time limit on it, then, I don't know how to handle that. It can go on for 3 or 4 hours. So, Gary, am I still on with you?
Yeah, you got it. We still got you here, David. Yeah, everything's great.
Okay, I've lost you, but that's okay. Let me continue. And so I started becoming an expert on time management. I took every course there was. Some were worthwhile, but there's always a good idea here or there. And one of the things I found out was limit your time at the office. And that way you have to focus yourself on A priorities, and you can't go wasting your time on B's and C's. If I could digress just a little bit.
Yeah.
As you said, I was the primary speaker for years at RE/MAX because I was the least expensive person. I didn't have to get a speaking fee. And I ran 200 to 220 days a year of giving speeches all over the world as we got bigger and bigger. I did an experiment one time, and I said, what's the difference? This is back in the 70s, by the way. What's the difference between a real estate agent that makes $100,000 a year and one that makes 40 or 50? And so I asked a group of 1,000 RE/MAX agents to keep a log for 1 week of everything they did from the time they woke up to the time they went to bed. And then I had a form for them and said, okay, we're going to divide your activities into A's and B's and C's. A's earn you money. B's lead to money, and C's are necessary evils. And so the C's include getting gasoline in the car because you're showing people around, getting a car wash, going to the MLS meeting, going on tour with the office to see what the inventory looks like, going to sales meeting at the office, et cetera, et cetera. The B's might have been floor time, sitting on open houses, writing advertisements, prospecting in some way. And A's we're being face to face, belly to belly with a customer. And we looked at it and we knew the incomes of everybody. And we found out that the A's that were making over $100,000 a year were spending 70 to 80% face to face with clients. And the others that were making the 40 or 50,000 a year were spending 60, 70, spending 20 to 30% face to face with clients. And so what it came down to was a very simple concept of, hey, where do you prioritize yourself? And so when you look at all the crazy things I've done and all the vacations and everything, you can say he's a workaholic. He was working 18-hour days. He would go on a speaking tour for 90 days, which is pretty tough, 6 days a week on the road. But then I took a month off. I took 2 months off. I had a staff that I trusted and I believed in. And so now what I do is I plan my life on a weekly, monthly, quarterly, and an annual basis. And right now I can pull up my computer for you and I can show you where I'm at 200 and some days of 2024. And wow. A bunch of those are vacations, golf trips, trips to Hawaii, trips to the Caribbean, and then a bunch of it is obviously travel for Remax and the other 22 companies that I operate.
Yeah, David, I shake my head and I'm sitting here and I'm trying to focus, but I'm taking like pages and pages of notes here as well. And, you and I have done this, a few times now. You said something that I want you to share. So 2 points I want to make on what you just said, or 1 point for sure. I said, how do you do it? How do you have adventure and how do you run this huge worldwide company? And you said, I became an expert at time management. The key point, guys, again, personal development, made the time to become an expert at time management. It's the common theme that you're hearing through David's, talk with us today here is just about that ongoing lifelong commitment to personal development. David, I was you were gracious enough to host us there. We were at your home in Denver last year and we sat down and you talked about the 3 quadrants or segments of life. You talked about the early years, the earning years, and the yearning years. And I've told that story so many times now. People are probably tired of hearing it, but I'd love it to hear it from you, like those quadrants and the fact that another door, closes every day. Maybe you could just share because it really puts how we spend our time and our life into perspective, or it certainly did for me.
Yes, there are 3 or 4 boxes of life, and I've taught this now for over 40 years. The first is your learning years from the time you're born until the time you complete either high school or college or whatever. So you're learning how to become a human being. You're learning social skills, leadership skills. You're learning what you like and what you don't like in the world. And then you have the next section, which are your earning years. The earning years, you start lower because at age 20 or 21, you're at the bottom of the totem pole. And by the time you get a good skill set and some promotions and stuff, by the time that you're ready to retire, you're at the peak of your earning years. And then the third is that's your yearning years. That's supposed to be golden years. But by the time you get there and you think, I'm going to retire, I'm going to play golf 3 days a week, I'm going fishing, I'm going to visit the grandkids and the kids and stuff. And you find out that number one, you don't have enough money, or number two, the physical ailments of what you've gone through for the last 60, 70 years has slowed you down to the point where it's not as much fun. So the whole concept about that is you should be enjoying life in all 3 sections. And in all 3 sections, you should be a philanthropist. And if you're in the earning years and you're 17 years old, you don't have money to give away, but you've got time. And so with time, you can go to the old folks' home, or you can volunteer at a youth center, or you can volunteer at a nursing home. So you have more time than money, but you can still give back to your community. In your earning years, you're limited on money in the early parts of that, but you also should continue to be learning. And learning is a lifelong habit, And a lot of people, like in the United States, the average business person reads less than 2 books a year. And so you're not continuing to learn, and you're not vacationing the way you should. And so if you don't set the time aside to take vacations and book it and pay for it in advance, there's always going to be an obstacle that says, I'm too busy to go right now. And then finally, in your later years, when it's supposed to be your retirement years, why would you stop learning? If you always wanted to learn photography, if you wanted to learn to play the piano, it's a perfect time. And now you have more time and you've got the ability to do it. So life is meant to be lived in 3 separate sections, but all facets of life in each one of those sections, just to a different degree. Gail and I was given a very nice philanthropy award from National Association of Realtors, and one of our top realtors, a competitor I've tried to get to Remax for over 40 years, but he was the speaker, and he got up and he just explained that story, and he said, I learned this from Dave almost 30 years ago. And he says, but Dave, there's 4 boxes of life. And I said, okay, what? And he said, sudden death over time. And he said, ladies and gentlemen, Dave and Gail run 22 different businesses. Right now, they formed 2 new businesses this year. And Dave almost died in 2012, coma for 3 months, quadriplegic for a year, has all the money in the world, could retire. He's a philanthropist, etc. But he's in sudden death overtime. This is the last quarter, and he is making the most out of his last quarter, period. And so he's still doing all those things, but he's been granted an extra few years of life, and he's excelling at what he did. And so I'm working on a paper right now that we're going to publish. It's for free. It's basically called Since I Died. And it's looking back to 2012. My heart stopped. I was in a coma for 3 months, several operations. And the question would be, what had happened if I died then versus what did I accomplish in the next 10 or 12 years? And what I accomplished was, well, wealth, that's fine. Philanthropy, we've given hundreds of millions of dollars away to causes we care about. We've started a dozen new businesses and got reinvigorated with the youthful people opening their own new businesses and so on. We took Remax public. It's the end result of what those doctors and nurses did, saving my life. I did not waste. And nobody knows when the final day is, but there's no reason in the world for achievers to sit on their butt when they get to a certain age and say, I quit. I'm just going to sit here and drink, or I'm going to just sit here and eat, or I'm just going to sit here and watch television. The people watching your podcast are entrepreneurial. They need to be entrepreneurial their entire life, but they need to look at these 4 boxes of life and say, am I finding the balance I want in each one of these places? And the way you do that, by the way, most people plan a 2-week vacation better than they plan their entire career.
So true.
If you say you're going to Disneyland, you'll figure it out 14 days, airplane flights, hotels, which park you're visiting on which day, etc. But life seems like it's limitless, that it's always going to be there. And so you don't structure and plan your life. I'm not an organized person. I'm the worst organizer in the world, except for I'm good at organizing my life. I mean, me handling paperwork, forget it. It just stacks up on my desk, and I teach courses on how to get rid of it, okay? But you need to figure your career and your life out and make it work. You build a blueprint, step-by-step plan. You look at it and analyze it every week, every month. How am I doing? Am I doing what I really want to do? The life is such a wonderful experience. Any one of us is lucky enough to get. And if you were lucky enough to be born in Canada or the United States, or to have immigrated to Canada or the United States, you're already luckier than 98% of the people in the world. And me as a world traveler, Africa, Asia, South America, Mexico, whatever, we have a higher standard of living than almost anybody in the world. Just being here puts you in the most successful, wealthiest 2% of the world.
And with that, my friends, that is a wrap for Mr. Dave Liniger. Dave, that was absolutely extraordinary. For those of you that haven't heard the whole story, we didn't get to it. It was remarkable. Dave wrote a book called My Next Step. And that was after he actually battled odds where the doctors said to him, you will never walk again. Start making plans. We don't expect you to make it. When a staph infection turned septic, that turned him into a quadriplegic, that, literally everyone in his orbit, questioned whether or not he was going to survive. It is an extraordinary story. It is just adversity after adversity after adversity. I mean, I have never met anyone who has got sort of the love and adventure and grit, determination, and heart that Gail and David Liniger do. David, thank you so much. Thank you for being a friend of mine and a mentor to mine, and and doing this by a simple text. Hey, David, would you mind being one of my guests? You're an extraordinary individual, and I'm so grateful. Thank you on behalf of the entire DLC group of companies, all of the realtors, partners, suppliers that are watching this podcast today.
Hey, thank you very much for the opportunity. I'm looking forward to seeing you and my other friends in our brainstorming group coming in October.
Yeah, can't wait back to Texas, David. It's going to be incredible.
Right.
I'm sure we'll talk or text in the meantime. But with that, to our sponsor, First National, to our agents, to our owners, for all of you who have believed in us for so long, thank you very much for all the loyalty and good work that you continue to do. We're very proud of each and every one of you. Have a great day, guys. Thank you. David, you and I will stay on and just chat afterwards.
I'll be right back to you in 2 minutes.
Okay, perfect.